As a co-host, Frank Fritz was a huge hit with American Pickers viewers. He passed away on September 30th, 2024 when he was 60 years old. His friends and family were devastated by his untimely death, but they were even more devastated by the large sum of money he left behind. Lots of upheaval, stress, and shock would ensue as his family's perception of him shifted due to the windfall he would receive. I think it would be a good idea to listen to the tape again before discussing the millions of dollars he left behind. Let us examine the final moments of a man whose entire life was devoted to traveling in search of America's forgotten treasures. In the end, he joined their ranks. It was common knowledge that Frank's health had been deteriorating in the years leading up to his death. In 2022, he suffered a brain infarction. 2 years later, he would succumb to the complications that had ensued. According to TMZ, late sequela of cerebral infarction was listed as the cause of death on the death certificate. This is the medical word for permanent brain damage caused by a stroke. And that was just the beginning. Frank was also dealing with aortic stenosis, a condition that hinders the heart's ability to pump blood effectively. The worst decisions can't alter destiny, and it was a double whammy. Now, though, it becomes downright human. There was more to Frank's story than just his downfall, despite his health issues and personal troubles. A reunion with his longtime co-host and friend Mike Wolfe was also on the agenda. The two had been inseparable since middle school. Because they were both growing up without their fathers and enjoyed picking, they got along. Having a lot of money and fame can weaken even the strongest of bonds. Things had deteriorated to a critical point by 2021. During an interview with The Sun, Frank had no qualms about exposing his underwear. According to him, Mike is turning American Pickers into a solo performance, much like Aerosmith with Steven Tyler and the rest of the band. He was the center of attention, according to Frank. Aerosmith and Steven Tyler are like two halves of a coin. It was clear where I belonged on the show. Now I'm in second place, behind him. Very poor. And now for the unexpected part. They began to reconnect as friends following Frank's stroke in 2022. Mike was determined to make amends with his friend before he let him go, so they had another conversation in 2023. In an interview with People, Mike said, "I got the call that he wasn't doing well." He pointed out, "I just feel blessed that I was able to get there." Mike had a way with words about those final moments that could break the heart of anyone. For the hour or so before he passed, I held his hand and massaged his chest. I covered his eyes with my fingers as he took his final breath. Just think about that for a second. Two men who had logged more miles together than the average married couple said their goodbyes in a low-key, intimate way. Fame, fortune, and their own personal demons had tested their friendship. Word got out to Frank that Mike loved him. His anger had subsided. "Just go find your mom," Mike whispered as he helped Frank through his struggles. Find her immediately. It wasn't about minor disputes, old grudges, or TV ratings at that moment. Just before the last bow, two friends found solace. However, Frank Fritz's story wasn't the only moving part. What started as a pastime for him when he was a kid eventually became a multi-million-dollar enterprise. Gathering things has always been something that Frank enjoyed. He was born in Davenport, Iowa. Any and all rocks, beer cans he liked. After 25 years of inspecting fire safety equipment, he discovered he could make a living by searching for rare items. Prior to the 2010 debut of American Pickers on the History Channel, Frank had a lengthy history of picking. Frank, Mike Wolfe, and Danielle Colby traveled the nation in search of treasures stashed in abandoned houses, garages, and junkyards. Quickly becoming a smashing success, the show catered to people's insatiable appetites for both the thrill of discovery and the nostalgia of long-lost Americana. Throughout its 22 seasons, American Pickers had 300 episodes. It was about more than simply antiques. It was about Frank's keen eye and infectious enthusiasm. He rose to fame because he had an uncanny knack for finding worth in seemingly worthless objects. It wasn't simply the TV show that contributed to his wealth. In 2013, Frank published How to Pick Vintage Motorcycles, and in 2011, he published The American Picker's Guide to Picking. Both books were written by Frank. His reputation as an authority in the field of antiques was further cemented by these massive hits. His former Savannah, Illinois store is the site of Frank Fritz's discovery. Make sure you remember it. Collectors and fans from around the globe flocked to this enterprise. It was believed that Frank had a tidy $6 million in assets when he passed away. Sure enough, the man who once rummaged through junkyards for dilapidated bicycles and rusted signage had amassed fortunes that many in the entertainment industry could only fantasize about. So, what exactly does all that cash go toward? Leaving behind that much money is sure to bring tears to the family's eyes. Sobs brought on by the burden of what has been lost, as well as by the sadness itself. Tragically, Frank passed away, leaving behind not only a void in their hearts, but also a windfall that would alter the course of their lives irrevocably. However, cries can vary greatly. Some of the sobs were filled with gratitude for the care that Frank had given to those closest to him in his final days. He had a reputation for kindness. But there were also sobs of grief over missed opportunities to mend fences and unspoken hurt feelings. The inevitable stress, tears followed. Whenever there's a stake of millions of dollars, any family can get fighting. Who can say for sure what Frank's will said? His estate was worth millions of dollars. Who would inherit it? Who could it have been? Relatives, friends, or even an unexpected stranger? On October 23, 2023, 1 year prior to his death, the astute Frank submitted his will to the court. His health had been declining gradually since his stroke in 2022, but nobody anticipated a precipitous deterioration. However, Frank was risk-averse, particularly with his finances. The U.S. Following son's stroke, Midwest One Bank was designated as both his conservator and executor of assets, according to Son. The very act of will, all alone, all of the hidden information was safeguarded. One thing, though, was crystal clear. His $6 million bequest was approved shortly after his death on October 18, 2024. But before that, let's return to the past. Frank suffered a devastating stroke at his Iowa home in July 2020. A health scare wasn't the only thing that happened. Other people took charge of his life at that turning point. He was unable to meet his most fundamental requirements, including those for food, shelter, and health care, due to his inability to make sound decisions. A short time later, Frank's loved ones petitioned the court for guardianship and conservatorship, formally placing him in a legal framework whereby others would manage his financial and personal affairs. Midwest One Bank handled his finances, and Chris Davis, a lifelong friend, took on the role of guardian and oversaw all of his medical care, including physical therapy and Crohn's disease treatments. Where does that leave his most cherished belongings? An Americana museum could have been housed in the outbuildings on his property, thanks to his extensive collection of antiques, vintage motorbikes, and other stuff. Despite the incomplete inventory, the conservatorship records revealed an intention to keep the majority of the artifacts in storage and use only a small selection to stock Frank Fritz Finds, an antique store in Savannah, Illinois. Who will take care of his loved ones? Who were Frank's heirs, and how did they figure into the tale of his fortune when he passed away? The situation becomes more complex now. Frank didn't tie the knot. In 2021, rumors circulated that he was finally tying the knot with his longtime sweetheart, Diane. What did the facts reveal? They ended their relationship long before he passed away. Their romance fizzled out due to betrayal and grief. Acquaintance who was forthright regarding Frank's final months, he felt really bad, Jerry recalled, bringing up visits to Frank at the nursing home where he was paralyzed on one side. When Frank raised his arm to raise it, it would simply fall back down, revealing his wrath. Being totally confined to a bed must be very difficult. Even on the best of days, he struggled to express himself. Jerry nailed it. I think Frank could have lived a lot longer if he had had the will to live. Finally, there was Mike Wolfe, who had alternately been Frank's greatest ally and worst adversary. Their friendship had been all over the place, from being friends in middle school to being co-hosts of one of the History Channel's biggest shows to being co-workers who no longer spoke to each other. Even though Frank's health was deteriorating, they had reconciled by then. There was still the unanswered question of whether Mike Wolfe would receive any of Frank's money, even after all the emotional relief. I don't understand. Everyone is in the dark about the distribution of Frank's assets now that the will has been signed. Fritz finds his shop and his collection of antiques played a significant role in his financial legacy, as is well known. Using Frank's legion of admirers, his friend Jerry dropped hints that a sale was in the works, ensuring that his cherished possessions would find homes with their rightful owners. "That's what I would do because of his fan base," said the actor. "A sale will benefit him much, in my opinion." While those in the antiques industry speculated about what would happen to Frank's collection, his chosen and blood relatives coped with the loss of a loved one. Money was just one consideration. Their lives were profoundly affected by the man who was the subject of the story. Money couldn't undo the damage that his struggles with addiction. For years he endured excruciating pain as a result of his Crohn's disease and his broken back. It wasn't easy for the second one to get better after surgery in 2019. Substance abuse brought Frank solace, but he soon developed an addiction. His addiction was known to those closest to him by the time he left American Pickers in 2020. Particularly for his friend, Mike Wolfe had witnessed how difficult it was. He became addicted to opioids, and that's when everything changed, according to him. He instituted precautions, insisted that Frank check into a rehabilitation center, and maintained faith in Frank's ability to recover. However, how much emotional and monetary did Fritz's struggle with addiction and health issues cost him? The answer might catch you off guard. While he was performing at his peak, Frank had a comfortable $6 million for emergencies. But by the time he passed away, a significant portion of that fortune had gone directly toward medical expenses. Here, we are not referring to infrequent doctor's appointments or the occasional filling of prescriptions. Medical treatment and in-home care cost Frank $30,000 per month following his stroke in 2022. Not even a reality TV star could sustain an annual salary of nearly $360,000. Medical expenses weren't the only thing at stake here.